I previously made a video similar to this, but it seems like the OpenAI NPM package has introduced some breaking changes. So today you'll learn how to build a ChatGPT Discord bot, and unlike the previous version, this one supports multiple channels, has support for GPT-4, and you can even ping the bot outside of the listed channels to get a response. Before we start, make sure you have Node.js installed because we're going to be creating our bot with JavaScript. In addition, make sure you also have a code editor installed. I highly recommend VS Code, but feel free to use whatever code editor you're comfortable with. Finally, because we're going to be writing JavaScript code, make sure you know at least the basics of JavaScript. To start off, we need a Discord bot account. To create one, head over to discord.com/developers/applications. Once you're here, go ahead and create a new application and give your application whatever name you want to. I'm going to be calling this GPT-4 bot, and go ahead and accept the terms and click on create. Once you create your application, head over to the bot section on the left and let's go ahead and configure some stuff. So first of all, I'm going to go ahead and disable public bot because I don't want this bot to be invited by other users. Then scroll down and enable all privileged gateway intents. So I'm going to enable all three of these and click on save changes. This is required in order to receive enough information from the Discord API. So now let's go ahead and invite our bot into our server. The way you can do that is head over to OAuth 2, then click on URL generator. From here, go ahead and select bots and application.commands. Now scroll down and give your bot whatever permissions you want to give it. In this case, I'm just going to give this send messages because I don't want people to abuse my bot and make it ping everyone. At the bottom, you're going to see there is a generated URL, which you can go ahead and copy. And inside Discord, you can go ahead and paste your link, click on it, and from here, you'll be able to invite your bot. So as you can see, our bot was invited, but it is offline at the moment. Don't worry, we're going to work on this in just a moment. Now go ahead and open up VS Code. And from here, go ahead and click on Open Folder. Now go ahead and create a folder anywhere you like. I'm going to create it in my desktop and I'm going to call it GPT Bots. This folder will store all our bots files. So go ahead and click on Open. And now to confirm that you have Node.js installed, go ahead and open up your terminal by clicking on View, then clicking Terminal. I'm going to be using this shortcut throughout the video. Now within your terminal, go ahead and type node-v and you should get your Node.js version. If for some reason you're not getting this and instead you're getting an error, that means you did not install Node.js. So go ahead and do that first. Now let's go ahead and initialize an npm project. So we can say npm init-y, and this will initialize an npm project. Now let's go ahead and install all the required packages. So let's say npm install discord.js.env and OpenAI. Then hit enter, and depending on your internet connection, this may take a while. Once your packages are installed, we can go ahead and close the terminal. And now let's create a file inside the root folder, and we're going to call this .env. This is where we're going to be storing all our environment variables. The first one is going to be token, and this is going to be our bots token. To get our bots token, head over to your browser, and in the bot section, go ahead and click on reset token. Once your token has been reset, go ahead and copy it, and back in VS Code, we can go ahead and paste it inside our .env file. The next thing that we need is OpenAI key, and this is going to be our OpenAI API key. To get our OpenAI key, inside your browser, you need to head over to platform.openai.com. Once you're here, go to the top right and click on your account, then go over to manage account. Then head over to API keys, and from here, go ahead and create a new secret key. I'm going to call this GPT bot and click on create secret key. Once your key is generated, go ahead and copy it, and back in VS Code, we can go ahead and paste it over here. Now let's go ahead and create our main file, and this is going to be in the root directory, and I'm going to call this index.js. From here, we can go ahead and import .env, so let's say require.env/config, and this will give us access to all the environment variables from within this file. Now let's go ahead and import discord.js, so I'm going to say require discord.js. And from discord.js, we're going to go ahead and import the client class. We also want to go ahead and import OpenAI. And from the OpenAI library, we can go ahead and import the OpenAI class. So let's start with the discord.js client. So I'm going to create a variable called client and set this to a new instance of the client class. Inside, we can go ahead and pass an object, and we're going to go ahead and set our intents. Now inside the intents, we need a few things. So we're going to go ahead and set guilds, then guild members, and finally guild messages. Now let's go ahead and log into our bot. So I'm going to say client.login and use process.env.token. Now we won't actually know when our bot is online. So let's go ahead and create an event listener. So I'm going to say client.on and the event name is ready. So once this event is fired, we can go ahead and console log and say the bot is online. If we save our file and open up our terminal and type node index.js and hit enter, you should see that it now says the bot is online. And if you go to Discord, you're going to notice that our bot is indeed online. Oh, and I completely forgot to set the intent of message content. So make sure to go ahead and do that. Otherwise, you're going to get an incomplete message object. Now let's go ahead and deal with listening for messages from Discord. The way we can do that is we can set up another event listener. So let's go ahead and say client.on, and the name of the event is message create. So when this event is fired, we get access to the message objects. So let's go ahead and console log message.content and see what we get. So save your file and try running node index.js. And back in Discord, I'm going to say ping. And in the terminal, we should get ping as the result. So now let's go ahead and set up all the default configuration. So before this event listener, I'm going to create a variable called ignore prefix. And I'm going to set this to an exclamation point. Basically, what this means is any messages that start with an exclamation point will be ignored by the bot, and our bot will not reply to it. This is optional, of course, and you can leave this out. Next, let's go ahead and define the channels that we want our bot to respond in. This is going to be an array of all the different channel IDs. So let's go to Discord, and I'm going to copy this channel ID and paste it right here. Of course, if you have multiple channel IDs, you can paste them like so, and you can paste as many channel IDs as you want. So now within our message create event listener, we can go ahead and remove the console log, and we're now going to check if the message was sent by a bot. If it was sent by a bot, we can go ahead and ignore it. So we can say if message author bot, then we're going to return. Next, we're going to check if the message starts with this ignore prefix. And if it does, we're going to ignore that as well. So I'm going to say if message.content.starts with, and then we're going to put ignore prefix. So if that's the case, we're going to go ahead and return once again. Next, let's go ahead and check if the message was sent within one of these channels. If not, we're going to go ahead and ignore. So we're going to say if not channels.includes, and then we're going to put message.channel ID. So if the message channel ID does not match any of these channels, then we're going to return as well. However, if you remember at the start of the video, I said that we're also going to respond to pings. So the way we can do that is we can put an AND operator here, and we're also going to check if the message.mentions.users.has, and then we can put client user ID. The client user ID is basically our bot's ID, and what this is doing is it's saying if the message does not have any mentions that matches our bot. So overall, what this means is if the channel does not include one of these channel IDs and the message does not include any ping to our bot, then we're going to go ahead and ignore the message. So over here, what we want to do is we want to now respond to the message. And the way we can do that is, of course, by sending a request to OpenAI. So to send a request to the OpenAI API, we must configure the OpenAI object first. So if you remember, we imported our OpenAI class, and right after these channels, what I'm going to do is I'm going to define OpenAI, and I'm going to set this to a new OpenAI class. And inside this, we have to pass in an object with an API key property. Our API key is what's stored within our .env file, which if you remember is OpenAI_key. So we're going to put this over here by using process.env.openAI key. So our OpenAI is now configured and we can send API requests. So what we're going to do is right after all these checks, we're going to go ahead and send a request. So I'm going to say const response, and this is going to be the OpenAI API response. And we're going to say await OpenAI.chat.completions.create. And because we're using await, this function must be asynchronous. Now, if you're coming from the previous video, you may notice that our OpenAI setup is different, as well as our chat completion. These are the breaking changes that OpenAI introduced in their version 4, I believe, but it's actually really simple to work with. So anyway, we can go ahead and pass in an object inside the create method. And what we can do is we can go ahead and set our model. So this is the model that we want to set and use for this conversation. Of course, in the previous video, we were using GPT 3.5 Turbo, but you can also go ahead and use GPT-4. Now, as far as I remember, GPT-4 only works if you've at least paid once using your OpenAI account. So if you haven't paid it, then you're probably going to have to use GPT 3.5 Turbo. I'm going to use GPT-4 because I've paid for it. And next, what we can do is we can go ahead and set our messages. This messages is going to be an array of objects. So the first object is going to have the name, which is of course going to be the name of the person. Now I'm actually going to ignore this for now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set role first. The role can either be system, assistant, function, or user. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set this to system, and I'm going to give our bot an initial prompt. Next, let's go ahead and set up content, which is going to be the prompt itself. In this case, I'm going to say something like ChatGPT is a friendly chatbot. Of course, you can go ahead and modify this to your liking. Next, we also want to go ahead and pass in the message that we received from this event listener. So let's go ahead and pass in another object, and this role is going to be user. The content is going to be, of course, message.content. Now, once again, I'm not setting the name right now because we're going to be dealing with this later on. Anyway, we now have access to the response object, but just in case there's an error, we can go ahead and catch that using catch. And for any errors, we can go ahead and console.error and say OpenAI error like so. And in a new line, we can go ahead and pass in the actual error. So now let's go ahead and reply to our message using message.reply. And we're going to reply with response.choices. And choices is actually an array. So let's go ahead and choose the first element using 0. And from here, we can go ahead and access message.content. So let's go ahead and save our file and restart our bot. And back in Discord, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say something like maybe hello. And my bot has gone ahead and responded with hello, how can I assist you today? Now, at this point, you may be getting an error 429, and that's most likely because your account is very new. This error is actually so common that I have a full FAQ section about this error, and some of the fixes that worked for me in the start were these, but this is actually a more in-depth response from OpenAI support directly. Anyway, now our bot is working, so we can go ahead and add some extra features. Now in our code, before we send a request to OpenAI, I want to mock that our bot is actually typing. So the way we can do that is we can say await message.channel.send typing. Now this typing usually goes away after a couple of seconds. And if the response is super long, then it'll look like that our bot has stopped typing. So what we can do is we can actually set an interval. So I'm going to say const send typing interval and set this to a set interval function. And as a second argument, I'm going to go ahead and pass in 5000, which is 5 seconds in milliseconds. And inside this function, what we can do is we can say message.channel.send typing. So every 5 seconds, this is going to be sending a send typing to that specific channel. Later on, we're going to be stopping this after we get a response. So let's go ahead and deal with that. So after we get a response from OpenAI, what we can do is we can go ahead and clear the interval. And the interval name, if you remember, is send typing interval. Now it is possible if there's an error that we're not going to have the response object. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if not response. Then I'm going to go ahead and reply to the message by saying message.reply. And I'm going to say I'm having trouble, or I'm having some trouble with the OpenAI API. Try again in a moment. You can set this to whatever error message that you want. But make sure you go ahead and return so that your bot does not try to reply with something empty. Now, another thing that I want to do is I want the bot to fetch all the previous messages. So what we can do is before we send a request to OpenAI, we can go ahead and fetch all the previous messages. So I'm going to go ahead and create a variable, and I'm going to call this conversation and set it to an empty array. The first thing that I'm going to push to this conversation array is an object with role set to system, and the content is actually going to be the prompt. And this prompt is going to be ChatGPT is a friendly chatbot. We can go ahead and paste it over here as the first message. Next, we're going to go ahead and fetch the previous messages from the channel. So let's say let previous messages, and this is going to be await message.channel.messages.fetch. And in here, we're going to go ahead and pass in an object with the limit set to 10. What this means is it's going to go ahead and fetch the last 10 messages from that specific channel. Now, because the order of these messages is not correct, I'm going to say previous messages dot reverse, and this should sort it out. Now let's go ahead and loop through each one of these previous messages so that we can push it to the conversation array. So I'm going to say previous messages dot for each, and each message is going to be referred to as msg, or message for short. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to check if the message author is a bot. So let's say if message author.bot. Now we're not actually going to return first because we want to read the messages sent from our bot as well. And if we go ahead and directly return like so, then it's going to ignore our bot's messages as well. So what we can do is we can set an AND operator, and we can say message author ID does not equal to client user ID. So basically what this means is if the message author was a bot and their ID does not match our bot's ID, then we're going to ignore the message. Next, let's go ahead and check if the message starts with this ignore prefix. So I'm going to say if message.content starts with the ignore prefix, then we can go ahead and return. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is we're actually going to evaluate the username of the person. And the reason why we're doing this is because OpenAI does not allow any special characters. So we're going to go ahead and remove all the spaces, and we're going to replace them with underscores, and we're going to ensure that there are no special characters. So I'm going to say const username, and I'm going to set this to message author username, and I'm going to add this dot replace regular expressions. And if you want this, I'm going to have this in the description as well. So now that we have a valid username, we can go ahead and push them to the conversation log. However, if you notice, our conversations do have different roles. So we want to go ahead and check what the ID of the message author is. So we're going to say if message author ID exactly equals to client user ID, then this message belongs to our bot, and we want to treat it as an assistant. So I'm going to say conversation.push. And I'm going to push an object with the role set to assistant. And of course, setting the role like this will treat your bot's messages as its own, and it's going to generate an appropriate response. Next, we also want to set the name to username. And finally, we want to set the content to message.content. And of course, because we have already pushed to the conversation array, we can go ahead and return, and it will move to the next message in this array. Now, the code below this is going to run if the message belongs to a regular user. So I'm going to say conversation.push. I'm going to push an object with the role set to user, the name set to username, and the content message.content. Now, within our create method, we can actually go ahead and replace this entire array of messages with conversation. So if I save my file and restart the bot, and if I now go to Discord and ask what was my previous message, you should see that our bot is typing, and it's going to say your previous message was hello, which is correct. Our previous message was hello. Now back in VS Code, we need to do one final thing, which is actually breaking down messages that go over 2000 characters. If you didn't know, Discord actually has a limit on message characters, and the maximum amount of characters you're allowed as a bot is 2000 characters. So of course, sometimes these responses can be longer than 2000 characters. So let's go ahead and fix that. Now the solution here is to actually break down our messages into 2000 character chunks and send them individually. So what we're going to do is I'm going to create a variable called response message, which I'm going to set to this reply. And we're going to create another variable called chunk size limit. And this is going to be the maximum number of characters we want to allow within each message. So I'm going to set this to 2000, which is the Discord limit. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a loop. So I'm going to say for let I, and this I is going to be 0. And for each iteration, if I is less than response message dot length, then we're going to add it to I, which is I plus equal to chunk size limit. So in this loop, we can now go ahead and determine what part of the message that we want to send. So I'm going to say const chunk, and this is going to be response message dot substring, and we can pass in I with I plus chunk size limit. Now this chunk is going to be the broken down message, which we can use to reply. So I'm going to say await message dot chunk. And the reason why we're using await is we want to ensure that all the messages are sent in order. So that's pretty much it. So let's save our file and restart our bot. Back in Discord, I'm going to ask it to generate some dummy text. And in order for the response to be faster, I think I'm going to change the model to 3.5 turbo and restart my bot. But of course, you're more likely to have longer responses with the GPT-4 model. So all this time, our bot should continuously keep on typing. Oh, and there you go. It has gone ahead and sent 2 different messages. So that's about it when it comes to the Discord bots. I do want to mention that I recently started a newsletter around the development space. So if you're interested, I'll have a link to that down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.